So I've spent the last two videos talking about consciousness, perception, and why I believe it is so fundamentally important, how I believe that it is likely a fundamental force of reality, if not the fundamental force. Now I want to talk about something that I realized on my own, but is backed by psychology, systems theory, meme theory, various other discoveries that man has made about the patterns that humans tend to repeat. And one has to think to themselves, essentially the universe is one big unfolding pattern since the Big Bang, due to the laws of physics and whatever other mechanics we might not even know. Certain patterns always arise. Think about the Fibonacci sequence. Think about convergent evolution. Think about the fact with enough gas and mass, gravity's not just going to decide not to make a star. That pattern's going to execute because the substrate and the material is there. It's able to. It proliferates simply because it can, as do the majority of patterns in the universe. The catch-22 about some patterns, though, is they are parasitic. Butterfly effects are a proven thing. Another thing that's kind of heavy to grasp, but essentially it's a series of fractal cause and effects. They can be fractal, as I said, and they can be exponential. And it's important to keep these two facts in mind. The parasitic pattern is a pattern that can exist within the substrate of anything that can hold an untruth. Minds and the systems that they create and house this pattern. And remember, patterns proliferate simply because they can. Think about a bouncing ball. Each time it bounces, it creates another ball. Each time those balls bounce, they create more balls. And this keeps happening. And this keeps happening. And this creates a bell curve of exponential growth. It's multiplying every single time. That's how this pattern proliferates. Now, I will say some of my theories in regards to these mechanisms are my own. So, one thing I've noticed as a symptom of this parasitic pattern, or several symptoms rather, is that it replaces meaning with theater and thought with parroting. It also has this very unfortunate effect on entropy. Growth requires entropy. I couldn't exist if stardust didn't exist. If stars hadn't exploded, none of us would. But we do. That entropy created us and everything we've created. All the butterfly effects of man are a result of entropy. So entropy itself, while scary, because humans don't like death, we don't like finality, it isn't inherently an evil force. It's a necessary force. Part of the many patterns of the universe. But what the parasitic pattern does is it twists entropy. It takes it from a state of being able to produce growth to being growthless waste. Imagine each time that ball bounces, it takes growth with it. Imagine a forest that burns down and a new forest grows from the ashes. Now imagine that same forest completely stripped of trees, seeds, everything. It will be a barren wasteland. There will be no growth. And each time this ball bounces, it multiplies. Fractally, this bell curve grows and grows. And with its growth comes the loss. The growthless entropy. Think of it as like a memory leak in a system. Donkey Kong 64 came out on the Nintendo 64. Big surprise. And it was one of the few games that required the extra RAM expansion in order to run. Was it because the graphics were really good, or it was doing some things that other games didn't at the time? No. In fact, it was a flaw they hid by expanding the memory. And why did they do this? Well, because it was coded poorly. It had a memory leak. Memory leaks, they just keep leaking into RAM, filling its space up more and more until the game crashes. It can't run without that extra RAM because of the memory leak, and I believe technically it will eventually crash if left on due to the memory leak. Think of this growthless entropy as a memory leak of meaning into nothingness. And the bigger the memory leak gets, the closer we get to everything crashing. But when it crashes in us, it's not going to be a video game starring a cheeky monkey wearing a tie. It's going to be the human race collapsing. The answer to the Fermi paradox is likely the Great Filter. What is the Fermi paradox? It asks, why aren't aliens here? Why can't we detect them with everything we've been trying to, despite the fact that statistically we should be finding loads of signs? And the Great Filter says, probably because they kill themselves off before they become detectable. Well, we've established the universe's patterns. We've established convergent evolution being one of them. It doesn't matter whether it's nuclear war, AI uprising, famine, climate change, social obstruction, whatever, will eventually lead to a singularity where this mass of leaked away memory of the human race will reach its crescendo, leading to one of these outcomes. The Great Filter doesn't say why, but the parasitic pattern does. It provides a solution to the Fermi paradox, one that's already being detected by psychology, systems theory, meme theory. And did I realize this by studying all of that? No. It was simply by asking myself one question. If every system humanity creates becomes corrupted, twisted, and used for exploitation in almost the exact same way, without fail, every time, what makes more sense? That it just happens to happen? Or that there's an underlying root cause? And every bit of the universe's patterns? Once I had asked myself that question, I could never unsee it. Now I'll postulate to you a question, my dear viewer. How does one unsee cosmic horror? How does one see the mathematical and statistical inevitable extinction of not only your race, but likely all intelligent life across the universe? Just a simple loaded question with which I find myself unable to find the answer. For what I now call fractal weight. A weight of understanding things that dwarf any problem you've ever had. Make it look like a grain of sand on an infinite beach, the waves eroding it into nothing in the grand scheme of it all, compared to the scope of the parasite. So more about this parasite, more about these butterfly effects. Back to the bouncing ball. When this ball bounces, it can bounce in any one of these things that can hold a lie. Again, minds and the systems they create. And they don't stay isolated to the mind. They don't stay isolated to the system. They exchange. The balls bounce back and forth freely between the systems we create and our thought patterns. And as a result of this void that essentially consumes meaning by a growthless entropy that converts meaning into theater, that converts thought into parroting, it uses up everything it can along the way in order to multiply. And what does this lead to? It leads to death, it leads to war, it leads to climate destruction. And this pattern's capable of jumping up in scale with the scope of the host. Think about when we invented sailing ships that could cross the ocean. What did we use them for? Colonization. How many people and their cultures completely wiped from existence because of that? The Industrial Revolution. It's only been about 200 years and we've completely wrecked the planet. Social media, the biggest influence on the parasite being consumed within someone's mind. Each time we make a significant leap, so does it. Its curve is exponential and even that way. And the messed up thing is, it perfectly explains everything. A series of fractal, self-replicating butterfly effects that self-replicate and scale up both naturally and due to the progression of society. It naturally scales up because it deletes the space for growth. And so each time the ball bounces, the footprint of growth and its potential shrinks, naturally giving it less opposition. It's like rust that accelerates because you drove your car on salted roads. Humanity created its own mind virus. It's not a thinking being. It doesn't feel, it doesn't plot. It's just a series of butterfly effects that proliferate in the substrate because, again, like the star in gravity, it has the substrate and it has the fuel. Substrate is the system or the mind, exchanging that ball freely. The fuel is the lie. And it's not that the parasite exists within society, it's that society has become the parasite. Look at current American society, its political problems, which consist of concentration camps, racism, homophobia, bigotry, flag waving, doubling down, deforestation, war. Every time a human being has been diminished for profit, every time a tree has been stripped from a forest, every gallon of waste pumped into the ocean. I used to think entropy is the enemy. That's very finite thinking. Entropy is our friend. It's our mother. Growthless entropy. It's a way of affecting the mind, because the mind is a living thing. It creates what I call an endless hall of mirrors in their head. Propaganda, indoctrination, social pressures, desire for ease, desire to avoid discomfort, doubling down, all these various behaviors lead to every thought in that headspace, every reflection in that mirror, though it looks like it's coming from the one who's looking, it's not. It's imprinted by many of these systems. People who become completely consumed by this hall no longer form original thought. They just reflect what's been given to them. They parrot. They get neither the meaning of it, and they're purely theatrical. And so what happens when someone's completely consumed by this? What do we call it? We call it what it is. Anti-consciousness. Anti-consciousness. I spent a decent amount of time establishing consciousness as a fundamental force. And this is a big part of my part of this theory. What if, like many forces in nature, consciousness has an opposite? Consciousness, too, is a series of patterns based on the pattern nature of the universe. So what if there was a pattern that was the opposite? The parasitic pattern clearly creates states of anti-consciousness. Now, I don't know if this means that the parasite itself and the pattern is the opposite, or if it's the anti-consciousness that it causes that is the opposite. If it's the anti-consciousness, it makes sense. If it's the pattern itself, that implies there's some pattern behind consciousness as well. But at the end of all this, it spells doom for the human race. We've already crossed the point of no return, most likely. The evidence for that is all around. Look at the state of the world. Look at the state of the growthless entropy. Look at how much there is. Look how it's been steadily accelerating throughout history. Look how it measurably jumps up at certain technological thresholds. Look how it has measurable results on the psyche. Look how it has notable symptoms such as parroting and theater. Note that it causes a state almost as a reaction. Note that it has specific functions. These are all things that we can document. My contribution to it all is realizing it's all one big butterfly effect. And remember, I established butterfly effects as being what? Fractal and exponential. And it just proliferates because it can. So once again, my dear viewer, I will leave you with this question. How does one unsee cosmic horror?